Coming up on the Grimm Exchange.
When one ain't good enough, let's take a look at Doppelganger films with Dead Dicks directors Lee Springer and Chris BAVOTA.
And we're diving into found footage games with our friends from Overlook Our Podcast.
And we're talking suspense, greed, and evil copy machines with the director of the short film, The Third Hand. This and more on today's episode of
The Grimm Exchange.
Hey horror fans, I'm Mariam.
And I'm Marcus, and welcome to the Grimm Exchange, your one-stop shop for all your horror entertainment news needs.
To stay up to date with all our content, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell. What is going on in the world of horror? Time to check out the latest horror headlines.
Silent Hill fans have wanted a new film for some time, and it looks as if they've taken it upon themselves to do just that. Fan film Silent Hill Echoes was originally due for release in November of 2020, but along with COVID-related delays, the team also opted to do reshoots of certain scenes after feedback of the film was provided. We listened to the feedback, says co-producer Ken Cosentino. Once we saw how big the audience was, based on their response we knew we could do better. And they deserve better. We agree with their input, so we went back for reshoots. The reshoots have sadly been postponed until the spring, but they are optimistic that the film will be released on YouTube in the later part of this year. Paranormal investigators Peter Wren and Jason Hewlett have released a new book titled I Want to Believe: One Man's Journey into the Paranormal. The book is a collection of the most frightening cases Peter has encountered during his 27 years as an investigator. Peter has travelled all over the world to investigate every kind of alleged haunting imaginable. He and his fellow investigators have hunted for spirits in historic castles and prisons, family homes, hotels, and even maritime museums. The stories in I Want to Believe: One Man's Journey into the Paranormal include psychic encounters at a community theatre, confrontations with shadow beings and other negative spirits, and even a possible case of demonic possession. A new asymmetrical multiplayer horror game titled A Way to Be Dead is said to be coming soon to Steam. The game, which takes place within the same universe as another one of Crania Games' creations, titled Roots of Insanity, sees players attempt to escape a mad doctor who is on the hunt for a group of survivors in a hospital. The hospital also just happens to be infested with zombies. Gamers can play as Dr. Riley, the survivors, or even the zombies. It's similar to the Friday the 13th multiplayer. This first-person game looks terrifying and gives me some real Outlast and Resident Evil 7 flashbacks. Horror figurine collectibles, especially those of Mars Attacks memorabilia, will be happy that the new line of Super 7 toys are on the way based on the Topps trading cards instead of the Tim Burton film. The new reaction figures are The Invasion Begins with Ray Gun, Destroying a Dog with Dog, and Burning Flesh with Melted Assault Rifle. The articulated toys will measure 3 3/4 inches and they're selling for $18 each. So what does January have in store for horror fans? Well, we all need to start somewhere when it comes to horror, and some of us get into it at a young age. So if you're after something tame to watch with the family, then look no further than Disney's upcoming show, Secrets of Sulphur Springs. The show synopsis reads, Griffin Campbell and his family move to the old Tremont Hotel in the town of Sulphur Springs. The entire town believes that the hotel is haunted by the ghost of a girl named Savannah, who disappeared over 30 years ago. When Griffin and his new best friend Harper try to solve the mystery of what happened to her, they find a portal that lets them travel back in time, where they learn that the secret to solving the mystery is meeting Griffin's own father. It will arrive on Disney Channel in the US on the 15th of January and likely to arrive on Disney Plus at some point in the near future. But what else is there for horror fans out there at the moment? Well, last Friday seen the debut of The Devil's Light. The film tells a story of a weird world where possessions are on the increase and the Vatican decides to open up schools for exorcism all around the world. Tomorrow on the 12th introduces us to Horizon Line on Digital HD, which is a new thriller following a married couple who find themselves in turmoil after the pilot of their small plane dies while they're aboard, leaving them stranded in the middle of nowhere. American viewers will also be able to see the second series of the two-sentence horror stories when that returns on the 12th to the CW as well. Netflix doesn't have that much to offer this month in terms of horror, but it does feature the real-life horror of Richard Ramirez in Night Stalker: The Hunt for a Serial Killer, which starts on Wednesday this week. And those are your horror headlines. Can you imagine walking down the street, minding your own business, and suddenly bumping into a stranger who looks exactly like you? What if this person suddenly claims to be the real you? I for one think that sounds really creepy. And that's exactly what doppelganger films are all about. With co-directors and co-writers of the film Dead Dicks, we explored the cinematic dilemmas and identity crises of characters facing a second version of themselves.
Warning: the next segment contains spoilers for the following films. Is there anything more chilling than the idea of coming face to face with another version of yourself? A person who looks like you in every way, the same face, the same smile, but it's not you. How could it be? Literally meaning double walker in German, a doppelganger is an unsettling figure often used in cinema to create a disturbing, mysterious atmosphere. We can be looking at something incredibly familiar, but the unknown entity behind the face instills immediate fear, making it a perfect storytelling device for a horror film.
There was a girl, and the girl had a shadow.
Co-writers and co-directors of the film Dead Dicks, Lee Springer and Chris BAVOTA, talk to us about different types of doppelganger films.
The doppelganger in film, there's, I would say, really two branches of it. There is you and a person that looks exactly like you, who could be your double, but is not you, a stranger that may or may not be unknown to you, that looks identical to you, and that people confuse for you. And then there is another branch, which is yourself as another. It is actually you in the same space. So that could be a clone, that could be you in another timeline or in an alternate reality, and these things merge.
When we look at film in that, with that kind of definition of the two possibilities of the doppelganger film, there's a lot of different movies that could fit into there that you might not perceive as being a doppelganger film.
One of the most famous depictions of a doppelganger on screen is Hitchcock's masterpiece Vertigo. James Stewart's character Scotty falls in love with a woman, but when the woman seemingly commits suicide, he soon comes into contact with her double, making him question if there is a connection between the two women. The mystery of the unusual circumstances Scotty finds himself in creates suspense and a dreamlike state. Is what we are seeing real? Vertigo has been influential for many filmmakers, but this idea of an evil duality is prolific in a number of David Lynch's outputs, most notably Mulholland Drive, Lost Highway, and Twin Peaks. Here, Lynch uses doppelgangers to not only confuse the audience, but to also give the story a more haunting atmospheric quality. In 1993's Doppelganger, the double is not so clear-cut, in physical terms anyway. Drew Barrymore's character Holly is haunted by another version of herself, one that implicates her in a murder. It is not clear until the end whether there actually is a doppelganger or if Holly is suffering from a severe mental disorder. A graphic scene towards the end of the film sees Holly physically split, making an actual double version of the character. After it is revealed someone has been impersonating Holly to commit the murders. Again, a sense of confusion is created, but more disturbingly, Holly has been the victim of someone trying to ruin her identity. With an ability to create an immediate, unsettling atmosphere, there are numerous examples of thrillers and psychological dramas that incorporate doppelganger themes. But one that does it most shockingly is Black Swan. this film takes a literal look at different sides of the ballerina Nina's personality and how much she must change her identity in order to get a part as the Black Swan, whilst also staying true to her innocent self. Heightening the intensity in this film is the use of mirrors and reflections, which are used in every scene. This acts as a constant threat of another being there, making the movie increasingly claustrophobic.
I'm sure you're feeling up to it. Stop. Please stop. How about I dance the Black Swan for you? Leave me alone!
A more modern take on the classic doppelganger trope is Cam. In this movie, Cam girl Alice is locked out of her own account by an intruder who takes it over someone who looks just like her. Alice goes on a hunt to uncover who this person is and discovers more doppelgangers on the site. Cam's more modern take on this gives a great commentary on the current social media infatuation. Alice was obsessed with her status on the site, and when her doppelganger takes over, her ratings soar further up the charts. Here, the fear is not only that someone will take over your life and replace you, but they'll be better and more successful at it too.
If we would see ourselves, we are automatically uneasy, and the idea is that that thing is very often faster, stronger, better, and coming for us.
But even if it isn't faster, stronger, or better, I think it's easy for us to perceive it as being that because it can represent all the self-doubt we have about ourselves.
Another example of being replaced by your doppelganger is in Jordan Peele's Us. A family on vacation comes face to face with themselves, doppelgangers of each family member, like they are looking into a mirror. Unlike with other doppelgangers previously noted, the family's doubles are not able to speak and communicate through screeching, so there is a notable difference. But these doppelgangers are out for blood, and they will replace this family at whatever cost. Us offers a terrifying social commentary on living the American dream by seeing the two different sides of it and how it can't be sustained. Peele said, quote, "I love doppelganger mythologies and the movies that have dealt with them. I wanted to make my offering to that pantheon of evil double films." Chris and Lee talked to us about making a doppelganger film.
So in Dead Dicks, what's interesting is that we kind of didn't set out to make a doppelganger movie. And we sort of thought, when people described them as clones, we were like, well, that's not exactly it, because it's not a clone of him. It is literally himself.
Yeah.
It is himself again. And so it's a bit of a twist because very often it's self as other, and we were like, this is self as self.
Yeah.
And that there's a disappointment in that.
Yeah, it's a recreation. He's trying to recreate himself better, but it's impossible. And then, of course, within the film, the moment that two exist at the same time, you can't have that. It's not allowed. So one has to be different. And in our film, the one that is different is the corrupted version of you.
Doppelgangers allow filmmakers to go to some very dark places. They make us question reality and can be both mischievous and deadly. It's no wonder they continue to infiltrate our screens, but let's hope we never come face to face with our own.
Chopping up my evil clone. Maybe someday that'll feel weird.
And now it's the time on the show where we have a bit of fun. Let's head over to the Grimm Zone.
This episode's Grimm Zone is sponsored by Little Bitch Cross Stitch. Little Bitch Cross Stitch is the best place to get alternative and controversial cross stitch and embroidery cards, gifts, art, and decor, all of which is handmade. This one-of-a-kind artwork is a must-have for anyone who wants to remind their friends that they love them like flies love poo. This month, Grimm Exchange viewers get 10% off a minimum purchase value of £20. So if you want to get 10% off of your Little Bitch cross-stitch order, go to this website and type that promo code and get your 10% off now.
In today's Grimm Zone, we've got some guests who are experts in the found footage genre.
That's right, our friends from the Overlook Hour podcast and the Unnamed Footage Festival are here today from San Francisco to give us their take on their favorite found footage games.
So we're going to talk about 5 true-to-form found footage games. We're not talking about found footage as a style of gameplay, like survival horror, rather a framing device that creates a unique and personal form of storytelling. The games we'll be covering all utilize their respective platform or device in unique ways. From an encrypted laptop to someone else's cell phone, these games all make the player interfacing with the game an important part of the story. Number 1. Sarah is missing. Imagine you found a phone on the bus, at school, or on the sidewalk, and took it home only to find that it wasn't password protected, and the owner was a missing girl. Sarah is Missing lets you live out this dark scenario by transforming your phone into Sarah's. Your goal is to find out where she is, but being that you don't know anything about her, you must look for clues in her texts, photos, and emails, all the while making decisions that will impact the direction of the game.
I hear footsteps.
Number 2. Her Story. Her Story uses the framing device of a retro-style desktop computer. You must dig through a database of videos to help solve a mystery. The videos are of a woman whose husband has gone missing, being interrogated by the police. Unlike Sarah's Missing, you must search keywords in a computer's database without help from an AI, which ultimately helps the verisimilitude. The writer-director of Her Story would return 4 years later with the release of Telling Lies, which also involves watching recorded conversations to solve a mystery, but with a much larger cast and different video formats. Number 3. Night Terrors AR. Remember Paranormal Activity: The Ghost Dimension? That's the one where the family finds an altered video camera that allows them to see ghosts. Night Terrors AR is that. Turn off the lights and explore your own house using your phone's camera and flashlight as your guide. Night Terrors isn't incredibly deep as far as games go, but the initial gameplay is undeniably effective. Number 4. Hunt a Killer. Hunt a Killer Blair Witch is a subscription-based tabletop game where you help a proactive mom continue the search for her missing son. The game begins when you receive a package from Burkittsville that contains items and documents left on a missing boy's desk. This approach can be incredibly effective and personal if you're able to suspend disbelief. I mean, imagine reading a missing kid's journal looking for clues. That's eerie stuff. Number 5. Mystic Messenger. One day you download a mysterious app that lets you chat with cute boys, and you find out that they need your help planning a fundraiser. Along the way of planning the fundraiser and messaging prospective guests, you experience romance, laughter, threat from a religious cult, and all in real time. Although Mystic Messenger isn't a horror game, its narrative approach is much truer to found footage than, say, the Blair Witch game of 2019. So that was 5 true-to-form found footage games in no particular order.
The internet is a great place to meet and interact with people. But what happens when the person on the other side has ill intentions? What happens when a young child encounters a predator? Every parent's worst nightmare. It is this scenario that the film Megan is Missing looks at. To review the film today, we'd like to call in, once again, the guys from the Overlook Hour podcast.
That's right. Welcome, Russell. Good to have you here today.
Hey, Miriam. Thanks for inviting me on the show. We talked 2 months ago about coming on to review a film, and at the time, TikTok was blowing up with Megan is Missing, and I thought, well, what a great way to talk about a found footage horror film that I love, and I think a lot of people misinterpret. I'm recording on a weird laptop camera, and it's weird. It's just not great quality. But I feel like it's appropriate for Michael Goy's aesthetic in Megan is Missing. And I'm a little I'm a mixed bag of emotions. I I came up with the idea of, well, I was pumped first. I'm very excited to talk about this film. And I was like, you know what would be fun? I'll grab a beer and I'm gonna watch reviews from TikTok, which, you know, is a lot of like tweens and not even teens, like little kids who have watched this movie. And it's messed with me in a weird way. I'm both incredibly happy that the film landed and so many people are seeing it now. But I'm also, man, I'm bummed out. Half of the reviews I just watched were little kids crying. And, you know, in 2001, when Megan is Missing came out, I'm not sure when, but at some point it landed on Netflix. And I remember I got together with a buddy, and we love watching terrible horror films on Amazon Prime and on Netflix. And the cover art, it just like, it screamed low budget. And we're like, dude, we got to watch this. So again, you know, we got a beer and we sat down and we're watching this film. And the beginning, Megan is Missing uses mixed media in a way that almost lends itself to say that Michael Goy is a psychic, and he knew how prominent like content creators would be. It reads so contemporary right now. And at the time, I don't know, it seemed a little goofy or a little like overproduced but underacted. The pursuit of verisimilitude really, when you're working with like a thin script and like you're clearly not doing the studio Hollywood approach, it leaves a lot of room for I don't know, heckling. And you know, I love found footage, and it's probably my favorite horror subgenre. But at the time, I was watching them for the wrong reasons, and we were sitting there, we were having fun in the beginning. We're like, oh, this terrible little girl is going to get her and her friend killed. This is going to be funny and great. And then, you know, a half hour goes by, and I have this moment of clarity where I'm like, oh God, we haven't been talking for the past half hour. And it's really apparent that something in here is working. And I mean, the film takes a dark turn. I know this is supposed to be a review. I love the film. There's my review. It's great. And what I really want to talk about is not the weird experience I had with a friend 5 years ago, but the approach. The director, Michael Goy, he's a Emmy Award-winning cinematographer he was the head of the American Society of Cinematographers. Like, he's a very prolific dude and respected in his field. And a lot of found footage horror movies back in 2011, they kind of always caught flack for being amateur films made by no talent filmmakers who were trying to make a quick buck. And Michael Goy chose the aesthetic he did because he was moved by an article where a young girl was abducted. And he was really taken aback by how horrible this must have been for the family. And like any well-meaning to do director, he really wanted people to feel that terrible moment for a prolonged amount of time. He recognized that reading the article, he was deeply moved and then kind of went on with his life. And he knows that the art of filmmaking, you can really have a lasting impact on people. And he wanted to make a film that, I like to say, punish the audience, but, you know, leave an impression. And now that we've come full circle and little children are actually watching, they've created a challenge out of it. And, you know, you go on Twitter and Michael Goy is elated. He's so happy. And I understand why. I understand why he's happy that little kids are crying. It's because they understand. They understand like the horror of the internet and the potential of somebody abducting them and their peers. And he really managed to do what Diodato wanted to do with Cannibal Holocaust without actually, you know, committing the crime he was trying to warn against. I highly recommend the film. It takes a little bit in the beginning, especially if you're not a found footage fan. But for a message movie that doesn't anger its audience completely, like Cannibal Holocaust or Cuties, Megan is Missing is, it's not only effective for what it set out to do, but it's a great example of the approach you can take in found footage horror and just using a different kind of narrative structure. And yeah, I wanted to come in here and be really upbeat and happy, and ooh, I'm sorry for the weird energy, but damn, the movie works, and it's a testament to it. Yeah, thank you again.
If you want to listen to the Overlook Hour podcast, make sure to check them out on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Podbean.
We here at Grimmfest TV absolutely love horror films, but sometimes to appreciate it from a completely different angle, it's good to meet the filmmakers, the people who are actually creating these works of art. For that, we have our Grimmfest basement, where we like to connect with independent filmmakers from all around the world. So, let's check it out. Ah yes, the Grimmfest basement. Who are we going to meet today? The Third Hand. Director and writer of The Third Hand, Yanni Weisberg. Welcome to my basement.
Hey, Mariam.
Tell us a little bit about The Third Hand.
So The Third Hand is a short horror film that I made, I guess, a couple of years ago now. And it was something that I was just really driven to kind of make a film that I felt represented who I was, what I was interested in, the kind of films that I've always loved. It's a story about a lonely office worker who's kind of, working late into the night, and then at the end of yet another monotonous shift, kind of finds this doorway into an alternate world almost. He finds this room that seems to have been hidden or out of existence, and kind of what he finds in there. Well, you'll have to watch the film to find out, I guess.
Yes. What would you say gives the film its unique character?
One thing I always wanted to do with this film to kind of make it stand out, I think, is to meld a lot of different influences. I've grown up as a kid that loved horror films, and that's really carried on into my adult life. But I think first and foremost, I'm very much a cinephile. So it's not just horror that I love, but it's it's all the greats of cinema, and that's both domestic and international. So I wanted to kind of bring some of that to it as well. So there's a grit and kind of a grime in there that you'll hopefully kind of feel is familiar. There was a lot of kind of Cronenberg was a big influence. I love body horror, and that was something I really wanted to bring to it. But there was also kind of a control of cinema that I wanted to have in there. I'm thinking of directors like Fincher and Scorsese, and the way that they use the camera in a really purposeful way. So the way that you're moving the camera and moving it around the set and the characters to make sure that everything had a real purpose to it and was driven by the narrative and what I wanted the audience to think and feel. So I think that's something that I like to think is quite unique in the landscape. I think a lot of horror films, and I'm not trying to disparage anyone here because it's a vast community, and I love everybody that's involved in it, because I think everybody brings their own voice to it, and the broadness of the community is the real strength of it. But one of the things I wanted to do was for it to not have that kind of blood, guts, and everything that you can pour into a film kind of feel. I wanted it to feel very purposeful and almost kind of restrained, because that's the kind of cinema that I really love. So I think that's something quite unique about it in my point of view.
Well, this is all quite intriguing. I'd say it's time for a clip, wouldn't you? fascinating. But let's get into the juicy bits. What fun facts do you have for us today?
Fun fact. The prosthetics for the film were actually made by Amy Thornton, who is part of the Sean Harrison Academy, and he's done prosthetics for films like Harry Potter and Avengers, and films that, you know, are a billion times the budget level of our short film. Fun fact, the main set of the film, if you've watched it or when you watch it, you'll notice that a lot of the drama happens in the second room, and there's two big light sources which are strips cut out of the ceiling, and they were supposed to be like eyes that are watching over the main character. Fun fact. So a lot of the film centers around conflict with a photocopier, which is something that we're all pretty familiar with, especially if you've ever worked in an office. Now, one thing I can tell you is I wanted a specific kind of photocopier, something that looked more like it was a bit from the 90s, not the new ones with like a touch screen or anything. And it's really difficult to get a 90s photocopier now. Obviously, they exist in loads of offices, but you can't just travel around them. So I spent about 6 weeks trying to find one, and in the end had to drive the best part of like 50 miles from my house to just go and pick up a photocopier, try and shove it in the back of a car, and then drive it back for the film.
Well, Yanni, it's been fabulous having you here. Please do stop by the basement anytime, and until then, have a lovely day.
It's been a real pleasure, Mariam. Bye. Oh no.
Well, that's all we have time for on today's episode of the Grimm Exchange. Remember to support the horror industry by watching films, playing games, and reading books.
Speaking of films, don't forget to check out the rest of Grimmfest TV, where we present and feature the marvelously morbid makings of fantastic and talented independent filmmakers.
And finally, special thanks to our sponsors, Little Bitch Cross Stitch. We'll see you next time on The Grimm Exchange.
If I can